There you go.
Well, welcome to the August 17th, 2021 session of Tangerine SDR and a ham sci technical session. My name is Dave, KV0S, and this week I've been doing a couple of things. My wife has had a couple health problems, so that's taken quite a bit of time. But I've been working with the three Daves and Jules have been working on magnetometers and testing out a few things. I'll let them talk more about that. And also been following what Tom has to say about programming an FPGA. So there's some interesting news there as well. I didn't do a huge amount of the programming on either of those projects, but anyway, that's about it for me. Next on the list is Nathaniel, W2NAF. Go ahead, Nathaniel.
Thanks, Dave. Things are going fine here. I was mostly on vacation this past week, so not a whole lot of work from me. But this week I'm going to go through and we'll be finalizing the list for the Tapper DCC, which I know Christina worked on with people this past Thursday. And I know there's a lot of emails about all sorts of activity going on with the different parts of the project. So that looks really good. So I will work to get caught up on that this week and get ready to work with that, and then also get ready for the upcoming fall semester, which is right around the corner. So back to Nat.
Well, good bit, fine business. And next on the list, we have Dan in for XWE. Go ahead, Dan.
Good evening, Dave, and hello, everyone. Really not much to report. Did some stuff, can't remember what it was, so I'll leave it at that. Back to you, Dave.
Fine business. And next on the list is Jim, K4BSE. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, good evening. Not much to report here either. I had been having some problems with my grape. I guess this isn't really the right meeting for that, but had been having some trouble with grape. Twice I lost the signal and had to restart the Raspberry Pi to get it back. And I'm suspecting that something was kicking the frequency of my GPS DO off. So I finally got things set up to where I could monitor the frequency of the GPS DO and see if it see where it got kicked to, if it got kicked off. And since then, of course, nothing bad has happened. It's all been working fine. Back to Net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Joe, W7LUX. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh my gosh, my microphone's on. Hey, that's a great
Yes.
picture you've got of Kit Peak there, Jim. One hanging on the left as we see it, all the lightning bolts crashing around the observatory.
Oh yes, yes, I like that thing.
Yeah.
Bought that one time when we visited Kit Peak.
Kit Peak is down in southern Arizona, maybe 50 miles west of Tucson, and that's a pretty famous picture with somebody did some time lapse photography. Okay, Steve Serwin and I, WA5FRF, have been experimenting with sending sending and receiving pulses, and the delay is such that once we worked out all the details, we're 1 or 2 tenths of a millisecond off in compared to the actual distance between Flagstaff and San Antonio. Actually, he's about 20 miles this side of San Antonio. But we have sent both a single pulse on AM and on single sideband, and also chirp, the 0 to 5 kilohertz in 50 millisecond chirp. And let's see, I was able to put out about 375 watts carrier on AM, and then the watt meter was kicking up to about 11 or 1200 with the modulation. And on sideband, I was probably doing about the same, about 11 or 1200 watts PEP. And he was getting a fairly good signal, even though the conditions were not the best. In fact, at times I was having trouble hearing him, and vice versa. So anyway, that's what I've been up to in addition to a all morning public service event where we help out with the Big Brother, Big Sister half marathon. And we got more of those coming up. Anyway, thanks, Dave.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Bill, AB4EJ. Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening to the net. Things going well here. This past week had a little bit of a glitch in it due to an appointment I had with the oral surgeon to put an implant in, and he used the machine in my mouth that the only things come to mind to describe it is Black & Decker, or maybe Milwaukee or DeWalt, something like that, where they drill about this far down into your jaw and then actually put in a tap. Anyway, I'm over that now. Anyway, so I've been working on, I completed and sent in the DCC paper on RF testing of the magnetometer, as well as the video recording for the DCC presentation on that topic. And right now I'm doing two things. I'm working on I've got to do the little presentation on how to align the magnetometer using the local host, talking to the Dave Witten's runmag program, which I've set up so it outputs UDP packets you can pick up from anywhere in your local network and do whatever you want with them. And I'm moving one of my magnetometers to out from directly under the 80-meter dipole where I had it, and which I knew that was going to be an issue, and I went ahead and did it so I could have that to test with. And you can put enough, you put a kilowatt out on an 80-meter dipole about 20 feet above magnetometer, you can shut the magnetometer off, but that's no surprise. Anyway, I'm moving that to another part of the yard. Should have that project done by tomorrow, and I can go in and characterize that magnetometer again, see how it does. So that's the news from Northport. Back to net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is David McGaw, N1HAC.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm playing with various radio topics this week. One of the primary things I've been doing is trying to work out the power used at Raspberry Pi poles at the same time as driving a bunch of hard drives. It's not trivial, and they like to draw heavy pulses, so finding some power supplies are better than others. Some are pretty sloppy. You can pull like an amp and you get 5 volts. You pull 2 amps, you get 4.5 volts. Doesn't work too bad. Even though they're rated for up that. Other ones are solid to 4 amps, and our system can pull, levels at that between the RPi and the solid state drives and whatnot. A lot of currents in these systems. Anyway, that's what I've been working on. Back to net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Dave, KE&QWB. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello, everyone. Well, I've been doing some more magnetometer stuff with the Missouri Daves and Jules. They've been very patient with me, especially Jules. Although Jules did mention integrals today, and that may have set me back in group a little bit. But I think I'm almost recovered. But he's probably best to explain what's going on along with Dave Witten. So back to group.
Well,
back to Dave, Missouri.
Yes.
Dave.
Okay. Thanks. And next on the list, we have Dave Witten. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello. I don't know. I think I've mostly been, best I can remember, mostly been fighting with GitHub's security changes. I thought I was prepared for them, but with, as always with Git and GitHub, but especially Git itself, they don't tell you the most important thing, the one thing that you really need to know. And it took quite a while to figure out. So I think I'm going again, but that's all.
Okay, well, it worked fine for me today, Dave. So,
Oh, it's no problem to pull them down. It's
Yeah.
it's
Well,
updating.
I did get your update too.
Yeah, well, yeah. Good luck trying to do it. Do anything else.
Okay, next on the list, we have Dev, KC3 PVE. Go ahead, Dev.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So since my boss was in vacation mode, I thought I could also be in vacation mode. So last week I was also in vacation, and I think I'll be starting to work from tomorrow. I did few things, but I was not in complete full work mode last week. So which has been a very good break. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, next on the list is Gary, AF8A, sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
Good evening, everyone. Not much new to report. I just want to tell Dave McGaw, you're correct. Last week, we talked about using Google to edit their maps and get them to make some updates, and they actually did it for me. So thanks for the hint. Back to net.
Well,
Very good.
Fine business. So they can find your house now, right?
Well, kind of, sort of. It's not exactly right, but it's better than it was.
Okay. Next on the list is Hillman, KD2 MCR. Go ahead. Hillman? Well, he must be off. We'll come back to him if he. Well, next on the list is James, KG4 DSG. Go ahead, James.
Good evening, Dave, from the group. Not much to report here. I did spend the weekend at the QSO today, Hamfest. I give credit to Scotty and John Ackerman for their presentations. The question and answer on the Tangerine was very well attended. I don't know if anybody picked anything up, but there was like 20 or 30 people in the Q&A session. Maybe Scotty can comment on that. With that, back to the group.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Jay, WB8 SBI. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, good evening, everybody. Not a whole lot new here to report. Like previous commentator, very much enjoyed the presentations that of everybody at QSO today, especially from this group, and just looking forward to continuing to participate in the group. I've been away from trying to actively get parts and get things going. There were other higher priority tasks, unfortunately, but I hope to shortly be able to get back involved. Other than that, nothing new here. Looking forward to the Digital Communications Conference. And if you're in the Metro Detroit area this weekend, it's the Woodward Avenue Dream Cruise. About 1.5 million people over 17 miles, the largest one-day car rally in the world, and the county Amateur Radio Public Service Corps, under the authority of the County Homeland Security Department, will be very active in that event. Take care, 730. Catch you later on down the log.
Okay. Next on the list is Jim, 7J1AJH. Go ahead, Jim.
Good morning. Just monitoring progress. Thanks.
Okay. And if I remember right, it's been a little bit since you've been here. So welcome back. Next on the list is Jonathan, KC3EEY. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. A lot of good things this week. So I was able to get my VLF preamp and antenna fully assembled again, and I was testing it outside. It's been working beautifully, just as long as I either use a DC power adapter or have fresh 9-volt batteries. But it's been working beautifully. One thing that I wanted to mention about that specific receiver design is that Paul, well, it's Paul's design. I just modified some of the filters for 60 hertz, but it has acceptable noise floor up at 100 kilohertz. So it's a great receiver for up to 100 kilohertz, which some people were really interested in. The other thing was I was able to find for the Raspberry Pi a high quality sound card. It's based on the CS4727. That's the same codec that's used in the Behringer UMC 404 HD. This specific sound card for the Raspberry Pi is advertised as being isolated, or the audio path is isolated from the rest of the circuit. It doesn't really go into detail exactly what the isolation is. The schematics and everything are not available, but specs say that this is a really high quality sound card. It's a little bit bigger than the Raspberry Pi board. So what I'm going to do is if I could fit it, I'm going to try to fit it in my Raspberry Pi box and use it instead of the sound card that I already have. This way, I could do captures of 192 kilohertz. With that, I also wanted to mention, and I put in the chat, the VLF groups.io group. It's a fairly active group with natural radio and amateur radio enthusiasts in the VLF and the ULF band. And there has been hustle and bustle the past couple months with VLF QSOs, where we're talking frequencies of 8.7 kilohertz, 5.1 kilohertz, even successful QSOs using coherent BPSK at 1.7 kilohertz. Lot of good distance records for VLF amateur transmissions and decoding for the coherent BPSK. You need a GPSDO or a stable frequency source. For the synthesizer, you have to divide the 10 megahertz signal down to around 19 kHz and input that into the sound card. And on the output, the signal is generated, and you have the option of the signal on both channels, or a sine and cosine signal on the left and right channel if you do want to feed two loops through your power amp. But these reception reports are listed in the group, and they could provide valuable insight along with all of the other reception data like WhisperNet and RBN. So yeah, there's a lot of nice activity, and I'm going to try to get involved in the VLF transmission soon too. That's all I have. Back to the net.
Well, fine business. I noticed Hillman's back, so I'm going to go ahead and ask Hillman to give his comments.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good evening, everyone. So for the past, well, I mean, the Magnetar document has been sort of posted on the HAMSci website, although I don't think that has some link on the first page, but otherwise, the document about the overview of the project, magnetometer itself, and installation and operation manuals, including the document that Dave Witten and Jules provided in combination with my text. So I believe we have pretty much everything that we need for now, although I have to take care of some, bits and pieces at the moment, but otherwise the structures are there, text are there, some figures. So I guess hopefully that can be utilized by the people who are interested in installing magnetometers in their backyard. So that's all I did for the past week. Back to Ned.
Well, fine business. And next on the list, we have Jules, K2KGJ. Go ahead,
Evening,
Jules.
group. Am I coming through okay?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask Bill also before I forget, which linear power supplies are you using for your Pis? And you can, yeah, go ahead.
It's something I bought on Amazon called Pyramid, and I was going to mention that in my talk, except it's no longer available. I mean, my experience has been go on Amazon and search for 12-volt linear power supply, and you'll find several different makes.
Okay. I was also looking at some possible power transformers. Tolima makes a nice toroidal power transformer in the power rating and the voltage taps basically necessary to make a nice little regulated 5-volt supply at up to 3 to 5 amps. So anyway, going back to this week, it was a busy week working with Dave Witten and David Walk on improving the operation of MagRun. Dave Witten made some really nice changes, one of which was to simplify the parameter setting of MagRun, or runmag rather, excuse me, and the other which was to add 2 decimal points of precision to the results that are reported. So it's a very nice program, as it always was. Maybe Dave can say something later if he wants to about multi-mag that he's working on. David Walk did a lot, and I do mean a lot of experimentation with different settings. Finally came up with some suggestions for getting the timing close to the point where we're only losing maybe 3 to 4 minutes in every 24 hours now, rather than the longer term up to an hour or more that we were losing before, sporadically spaced throughout the 24-hour period. So that's good news. And again, thanks to both Dave Witten and to Dave Walk for what they've contributed this week. That's about it. Oh, the other thing we dug down further, if anybody's interested, later send me an email into the actual function of the RM3100 itself, how the registers work, how the actual conversion cycles work, and so on. And back to Net.
Well, fine business. I have listened carefully. I was reading the news as you guys were commenting, and I didn't have a lot to say. So fine, it was a good piece of work. Next on the list is Con, KE&QWB. Go ahead, Con.
Hello, y'all. Well, this past week, I've still been working on my GUI app, only for a little bit. I finished the course, so I'm not heavy programming it that much. So I'm back doing learning GNU radio and radios in general. I'm also preparing for autumn classes starting next week. I'm pretty excited for that. And yeah, that's about it. Back to Net.
Well, fine business. And let's call on Willie, N1JBJ. Go ahead, Willie.
Click somewhere.
Yep.
Good evening, all. So I'm mostly lurking. Yeah, the QSO today presentations were amazing. Those were a lot of fun. I'm mostly a holding pattern with the Grape 1, waiting for the next steps, kind of get a node number, kind of start uploading my data. Took over my antenna for starting to play around with JS8 call, which seems like kind of fun. Went down a GNU radio rat hole, which run that. I need Ubuntu, and in order to do that, I need the 8 gig Raspberry Pi. So I ordered that, which is going to take a week. So, you know.
Well,
that's it. Back to net.
Fine business. So next on the list, we have Scotty, WA2 DFI. Go ahead, Scotty.
Okay, hopefully I didn't mess you up by changing my name there. Move me around on your availability list.
Well, I'm getting used to it.
Okay, well, anyway, this week, like some people said, we had, I attended the Ham Expo QSO today extravaganza. It was pretty good. We did have a lot of response to the talk on the Tangerine. I think it was more like 50 people. There were, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 4, right? 5 by 5. So there's 25 thumbnails appear on my screen. And I had 2 screens worth of people who were asking questions or were there at least to listen to the answers to the questions. So yeah, I think it was pretty good, pretty positively approached, positively attended. And so I think it was well worthwhile. Also, I got to talk to to John from ARDC, and while our grant has not been approved yet, he's talked favorably of it. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're going to get the grant to build the interposer boards, the adapter boards. And John Ackerman has promised me he's going to get me the schematic for the clock module carrier board by the end of this week, so that we can end up with both of those boards in CAD if we get the money to pay for the layout guy, which I think we will. And also got done with a long conversation with our local rep on Altera. And no better news on the Max 10 FPGAs, but it looks like I will probably be able to get some ARIA 10 FPGAs much sooner than October. It's still iffy, but our order is still lost in the catacombs of the Arrow website, so we don't know where what happened to it, but we're working on that. But one other thing is that I was talking to our rep about node, pardon me, what do we call them? A network license, a floating license. Yeah. For the Xilinx tool, for the Xilinx tools, for the Altera tools. Now, there's already a floating license for the Xilinx tools. ORI has procured that and is up on their server. So I'd like to do the same kind of thing. And I've talked to John about how we could do that. John Ackerman, he's our IT guy, basically, between Dave, you, and John. What we got to figure out is whether the FlexLM license server will run on a virtual machine. And if it will, because that's what we have for the Tapper servers. And if it'll run on a virtual machine, and we'll have to open up whatever ports necessary to get to that virtual machine from the outside world, we could realistically have full Altera licenses that we could be checked out by any team member. So, and that will include the Quartus tools as well as the IP. And while right now we really don't need the Quartus tools for the Macs that we're using because the tools are free for Macs, some of the IP tools are not. Now, what I was told was that the Tri-Speed Mac and the NIOS tools are included in the free version and they should not be licensed. So I'll have to get with Tom when he's up here and find out. I think Tom figured out the issue and he's got it working. So when we hear from him, that'll be good news. But I can tell you now, they will not be included with the ARIA 10 FPGA when we go to the Data Engine Mark II. So we're going to kind of be proactive there a little bit to help out. And we may actually, by getting these full licenses, gain access to a bunch more IP that we would not have for the Max 10 that we would normally have to pay for. So this would be a good thing. So I think I'm going to continue pursuing this. And one of the things that we can do, our rep has offered, to set us up with a temporary 60-day license, and we can get that license tomorrow if we want. So as soon as we can figure out how to get it set up, we can set it up and have people log in and try it and make sure that it works. And then at some point, either we get grant money or we manage to get Altera to come to their senses and give us a free license, then we can put it up on the server and everybody can have access to it. So that's in the works. So I guess that's it for this week. Back to you, Dave.
Okay, well, next on the list is Tom in 5EG. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, good evening, Dave and the group. Well, Scotty, I have bad news to report. I did clear the license issue on the Mac to where it would let me do a successful compile and synthesize, no errors. However, when I tried to floor plan it, it told me that the Ethernet Mac would only run for 1 hour on the target and then would terminate until we got a license for the Ethernet Mac. And so again, I failed. In the meantime, I was able to, I tried the NIOS processors. The simplified one runs okay. If I try to instantiate the more powerful processor, it gives me the license denied error on the more powerful one. And so these are all coming as surprises. You only find them like 500 messages deep in a compile output or something like that. So there's a few other things that sprang up as well. Something called region lock, which I didn't have turned on, or ClockLock it is. And they need a license for ClockLock, except I'm not using it. So I think that's a non-issue. In the meantime, I was able to build the micro COS and their TCP IP stack, pull in the Max 10, all of the peripherals on it, and have it build the C environment with all the header files and all the base address links, and put all that together. The documentation for licensing on that is a little confusing. The documentation says it's good for 45 days, but then there's a text file that says if you're a nonprofit or a university, that there's no licensing restrictions, although it's a little unclear what a production version is, and call someplace in Austin to find out. So I'm still scratching my head a little bit on that. Spent some time figuring out how to build Avalon adapters for blocks so that I can build them into the platform designer tool, and kind of stopped about there. So that's where it ended up this morning. I ended up with the tri-mode Ethernet Mac not being usable due to license problems. So that's about it for the day. It's pretty much been a licensing nightmare. Back to the group.
Well, I got the preview, Tom, of your email, and I knew you had found those issues. Scotty, is there any chance that at least we could get one development board of the new FPGA for the project?
Yeah, for the Mark II, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be part of the grant that we would ask for the Mark II. And I did talk to folks at ARDC about including that grant with the previous one, because I talked with the Tapper board with I guess it was not the whole Tapper board, but I talked to Tom Holmes, and he seemed to think that it would be better if we were to put in a TangerineSDR grant that included several aspects, all to Tapper, that it kind of belonged in the same bucket, rather than say, here's a grant for a little piece of it, here's a grant for another piece of it, here's a grant for another piece of it, all going to Tapper, and all in the same project, but for different aspects of the project. So I kind of agreed. So I actually talked to the folks at ARDC, but it turns out that our grant approval is moved along so far that I don't want to delay that by going in and modifying the grant and adding something to it. And if they've already discussed it and decided and voted, I don't know how far along it is, but the impression I got was that this would definitely be delayed if you wanted to modify it. So we pretty much came to the conclusion, both ARDC and I, that was Chelsea over at ARDC, that it would be better to put in a separate grant at this point. Might have been better at the beginning to put them both together, but since we had already done one, it'd be better to put the other one in separately. And then I kind of floated the idea of the money that we would need to produce these boards in volume. And that's to the tune of $300,000 to $400,000, which is a huge chunk of money, I mean, to my mind. And they didn't seem to be fazed much by it, and they were kind of excited that the board would actually come to production, and they could maybe help make it happen. So, but the conclusion was also it was way premature to talk about that. I just put that in a letter to them, an email, kind of outlining where we are going with this. So maybe in the second quarter of next year or the late first quarter, we would be ready to do a production run, and we would need the funds then, but not now. But anyway, so I was encouraged to put in the grant for the DE Mark II. So I think it's reasonable to add in a development board for that particular part that we're using, and at least one. They're really expensive, so I hate to. I mean, if we can use them, good, but I don't want to just load us up with development boards because we can.
Well, I think it's good to have it one for the most active developer, and that at this point seems to be Tom.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if we could get one, that would be certainly good. And I'm really this week, that's kind of one of my tasks, is to get that grant proposal made up and typed up and pass it by the Tapper board and feed it to ARDC so we can get them deliberating on the next phase. And again, it'll include a board, and I will include, since we're going to have them for the RE10, the licenses, I'm going to include the licenses in this grant.
Right.
Now, whether they want to take them on separately or what they want to do, but I think from a community point of view, I would like to see licenses for the FPGAs available to anyone who wants to do FPGA development work. And so this is something maybe ARDC could sponsor, is multiple seats of the license that will be available to anyone who wants to do open source development work. They just contact ARDC, make their case, and if they have a good case, like we would all have a good case, then they get added to the list. And it's kind of like dial tone on the telephone. A couple of 3 licenses goes a long way because you only need it to compile. So you can do your code development and you can add IP and all that. And then when it comes time to compile, you have to check the license out. So 1 or 2 license seats could serve a fair number of developers. So we'll see how that goes. I know that there's 1 seat license available on the ORI from the ORI group to help with the phase 4 ground development because they're using a Xilinx FPGA. Well, we're using Altera ones. So anyway, we're beginning the discussion now with my local rep to determine whether because apparently they have government grants. Now they have license pricing to government grants, which we sort of qualify, to nonprofits, which we definitely qualify, and to schools, which is questionable. But even though we have involvement of a lot of universities here, it's just going to depend on which one of the pricing paradigms we fall under. And our rep says, well, we can request a discount. It doesn't mean we'll get it, but we can ask for a discount based upon what we're doing. And maybe the fact that this is open source and has broad appeal, even worldwide, would really tend to make them want to give the licenses out and make them available. Because the idea is, especially like Kong, he's going to learn FPGAs, he's going to learn Intel FPGAs, he's going to get a job somewhere. And then what's he going to use? Intel FPGAs. So to have more people up to speed on your product is a good thing for the industry. So for your company as an industry participant. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I'm starting the negotiation, but that may take some time. But my rep has said, hey, you want a free license right now? We'll give you a network license tomorrow. So you give me the NIC address of the server machine, and I'll give you the license tomorrow. They can generate it, and they can keep renewing it as long as we make a case for it.
Okay.
So that was one of the alternatives. If we can't buy one, well, let's just keep getting a 60-day one and get it renewed every 60 days, which I'm sure would get old after a while, but you know, it's better than not having a license, not being able to compile it. So yeah, so I definitely, a board is a good idea. License seats are a good idea. And we can add that all into the request.
Yep.
And see where it goes. Like I said, if it makes sense, they are pretty reasonable. The ARDC is pretty reasonable about understanding what makes sense.
Yep. Well, they have people that have been involved in SDR work before.
Yeah, yeah. And really, it's amazing because to have that kind of support, that monetary support, it's amazing. Between NSF and ARDC, it's really going to make this be kind of like what was the HPSDR would have been like maybe if we'd had that kind of support.
Yeah.
So pretty good, pretty cool. And the other thing is I'm still waiting on magnetometers. Probably next week we should have the Rev E magnetometers. We'll have 5 sets. So I want to make sure and send those out to everyone and have them tested and verified that they all work and they fit in the pipe and everything works.
Okay.
And then, hey, Dave, I'm going on vacation in a couple of weeks. I'm coming right through your town.
Oh, that's right. You go to visit by your brother's house.
Yeah, just east of you there. So
yeah,
I'll have to stop by and have lunch or something.
Yeah. Give me a call when you go by.
Okay. Might be 3 in the morning. Is that okay?
Oh, no, I don't know about that.
Oh, come on.
I was wondering, did you drive to Scranton?
No.
Okay.
No, I was too short of nose. And I was going to go to GNU Radio Conference, but I can't drive because I'd have to be driving during DCC.
Yeah.
So I can't really do that. So unfortunate. But no, Scranton, a little bit too far for a 3-day trip.
Yes.
So I'm going to haul some furniture out, go through your town, through my brother, see my brother. Then I'm going to drive up. It's on the way, right? Drive up to Minnesota to visit my buddy up there and then drive home.
Okay.
So just a little bit off the track to Minnesota, right? You know?
Yep. Well, that sounds good.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to getting the magnetometers and making sure that we didn't mess something up. And also, Dave, is Dave still here?
Yeah, he's here.
I might put out a panicked request at some point for a way to combine the programming of the magnetometer with the testing of the magnetometer and try to get a go, no-go test. Because it turns out that since I think we're going to end up making them here in Tempe because the costs came in so good. But unfortunately, that means that guess who gets to test all 500 of them? So now I'm going to want a little help doing that in terms of software.
What do you need? What would that entail?
But it's probably just putting a little bit of spit and polish on what you already have and organizing it into plug the board in, fire the thing up. It goes and it programs a unique number, and then it lights an LED red or green, whether it's broken or to the screen. Probably does it pass or not?
Sure.
And all it is going to be really, I think, is reading the remote temperature sensor.
Okay.
That's all I really, because if I can read that one, I can read the other one.
Yeah. If you can read the remote temp sensor, usually you can do anything you need.
But it may entail reading just a register from the PNI board and a register from the temperature sensor. Then I know both of them are working. And then if I don't care what the readings are, because if the temperature sensor is broken, it's like beyond the scope of the test. The test is to make sure things are soldered down right.
Yeah, but do you want to put the PNI module onto the board for each of 500?
Good point, because the PNI modules are going to be included in the bag of parts with the unsoldered connectors. So,
right.
So I could put a PNI board on, but that would not test the one that you're getting. So that's kind of pointless.
Right. But the temp sensor is easy enough. And, you know, the P&I board, it would be easy enough too, because, you know, it's got a version number in it, but it would have to attach it, and that kind of goes against a lot of the other things.
But I could use one P&I board just to make sure the sockets and all that were soldered down right.
Right.
Yeah, you could do that if you want to solder those sockets on.
No, I would take one P&I board and build it, and then I would use it 500 times to test it. Okay, so
yeah.
Well, would there be a socket already soldered on the? It wouldn't be.
The socket is soldered on the baseboard.
Oh, it is.
The headers are not soldered onto the P&I board that you'll get in your kit. But what I would do is I would take my test P&I board and I'd plug it in just to verify that the sockets were properly soldered on your board. So that, and then you'd have to solder the headers on your P&I board when you get it. So that board should
all
be,
of that I could put together pretty easily, a test for you.
Couldn't you just put a breadboard loop back on there?
I could, but I have a P&I board, so why not use that? I mean,
but
all I have to do is read run register to prove that I can do it, and that's it.
Yes.
Inserting it, you know, 500 times into there.
Isn't that what Dan is for?
Well, no. Yeah. So the thing is, on each board that the user gets, it only gets one insertion. It's my test board that gets 500 insertions, and we've switched all the connectors to gold plated, or gold flash. So that should help somewhat anyway, unless we wear the gold off the pins.
Yeah, you could set up something with pogo pins or something, a tester.
The thing is that the pins cost 30 cents. So if I'll just use 5 different boards, and then I'll just swap the connectors out on them when they're done.
Yeah.
And that's
whatever you want. I'm just
I'm just trying to make it easy. I'm just trying to make it easy and quick, because and so the idea is I'm going to put an extender connector onto the Raspberry Pi. The test will run on the Raspberry Pi. I'll put the board over the connector and then tilt it up to make connection with all the 40 pins, and hold it that way while I hit start the test. And then once the test is complete, I'll just pull it off the header, and then there's just holes left, and then it goes in the bin of good boards.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to solder anything extra on the boards. I just have to slide it on the connector, run the test, and then slide the next one and run the test.
Don't you want to test the 9650, the I2C link?
Yeah, so you're right. It's not quite that easy, because I'm going to have to plug in the cable and another board on the other end. And now how am I going to do that if I have no RJ45 on that end? That's going to be, so I'm going to end up having to build one with an RJ45 basically and test that.
Can't you use one of your other boards, or you don't have any of the?
No, I can use one of those, or I can
the D boards.
I can just solder an RJ45 on one board and use it as. In fact, that's a good idea, because that's the board the P&I goes on anyway. So I'll just, because if the board works on the remote end, it's going to work on the other end. I mean, on the local end, it's going to work on the remote end.
You could make a little pogo pin tester that you could press down on the remote end. All you really, and at least for everyone, if you separated the P&I testing from the other, you could press all of the boards just onto a jig that had and have one already set up with an RJ45 at one end, but at the other end you just test every board. And if you get I2C through to the remote, to those pogo pin connectors, you at least all of the PCA 9615 or whatever it is, and the temperature sensor, all of that's working.
But if I were to take a board and solder the RJ45 on it, and plug a P&I board into it, and plug the RJ45 connector into it, and plug that into the, I see, because there's no RJ45 on that end either.
Right.
Yeah.
So
for the remote, you have one fixed built up with an RJ45 at the Pi end, but at the remote end you'd have a just a little jig that take 2 of the boards, take an extra board and put the pogo pins on it, I think, you could do.
So we're saying that if the remote end tests good, then the local end should test good also.
It should work. If it works at the remote, it should be perfectly fine for the local.
Okay.
Because the communication works.
Because I was just thinking that the only thing that could be broken would be the connection to the 40-pin PI connector.
Yeah.
But if that's broken, then that's a defective PC board, because that has nothing to do with soldering, because those are traces on the board. And since we're paying for electrical test, that better not be the case.
Right. I think, you can certainly automate some of this to make it easy.
Yeah. And the thing is, what we do is we test the most likely failures. And then if we don't test 100%, we just offer 100% replacement if your board doesn't work.
Right.
And if you narrow that down to like one board or two boards out of 250,
yeah,
the poor guy that gets the one board will not be happy, but we'll fix him up with a new board.
Yeah, you just don't want to have 20 of them that you have to ship around.
Yeah.
It's the shipping and handling that's more the problem.
Yeah. So is there a place that I could buy pogo pins that would fit into like a 10-pin header type connector?
Well, you buy the pins separately. You just buy a setup. You buy however many you need. You can get them from DigiKey. You can get all different kinds. You can get them with different types of tips on them and stuff. And with pointy ones and pokey ones and all kinds of things, but and different lengths. There is a company in Canada, at least one, that makes jigs for you.
I'm just thinking I could take a standard paddle board like from SparkFun that has a pin out, has a hole pattern, and just solder 10 of them in, and then glue that down and make my jig out of that.
Yeah, actually you can you could do that, or you can just take a spare board and one of these things and solder the pins, the bottom ends of the pins onto that. Hook it up with RJ45. Don't depopulate any chips on that board that might
just use a blank board for that.
Use a blank board, and put the pins in the blank board with the spring-loaded ends sticking up. Then set the other ones on top of it and onto the the spring-loaded part, and see if it responds as it's supposed to.
Yeah.
That's kind of and even my scope here, I have a little Siligent scope or whatever you call them, and they even have that set up so you can Ethernet control, read, you can read waveforms and stuff and do testing scripts in it. I mean, it's got a whole microprocessor that you can program, but and it's a cheap one. But so these days, these things are very possible, but really for your purpose, it'd probably be just good enough to make to take a spare board and because it'll have the pins in the right place, the places. Yeah. Now the pins for the RJ45 may be a little smaller diameter. I'm not sure.
But we have a 10-pin 10th-inch center ribbon cable connector in parallel with the RJ45, so I could probe there.
Okay, then you're good. Yeah. I think you're good.
I was even thinking it would be easy to build an RJ45 to 10-pin receptacle, plug a header into that, and then just stick that in the pins and bend, push it over like I was doing with a 40-pin one.
Yeah,
then it requires one hand to hold that over, and one hand to hold the 40-pin over, and the third hand to start the software. And I have to use hold a pencil in my mouth to start the software.
You got a foot pedal.
And train a cat to come in.
The cat, or how about you just make the code run continuously, and then when you get them in place, it just says pass, 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 and you unhook it, it says fail, 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 and. Except that doesn't work because you got to program the PROM on board.
Don't forget you have 2 feet and a foot pedal, or 2 pedals rather.
Foot pedal, yeah, I have PTT pedals here for field day, so I'm all set.
Well, it's all doable, and it's all pretty routine, I think, in most shops that make and have to test many boards for any purpose. I think there's even a tutorial on it on the Adafruit, either the SparkFun or the Adafruit board sites, or both. They both have sold the pogo pins, but I think DigiKey sells them packaged.
Yeah, I think I've seen those because
they come in many different lengths. They're not cheap, but they're
I only need $10
for.
I only need 8.
Yeah, well, it might cost $20 for the pogo pins or something. Yeah. It's actually, who is it? Milmax, I think, makes most of them. That's kind of a little niche. I think it's them who actually makes them, but they have a bazillion different patterns. Like if you want to go to a flat pad, they have ones that look like little oil drilling things, and if you want to go to different ones for different purposes.
Scotty?
Yeah.
I just dropped a thing in the chat from Tindy, and it's a universal RJ45 breakout board to a bunch of different things. I've used them occasionally, so I don't know if that helps or not, but there's a thing.
It's in the chat. You dropped it in. I didn't. Oh wait, I didn't scroll down. Okay. The pyrite. Okay.
Not sure if that works or not, but as you were talking about what you were looking for, I'm like, how about the thing?
So is that available now? I'm going to that website. So.
Yeah. Well, your best bet is using a spare board as the template, because it's got the holes in all the right places.
Like I said, I'm just thinking it might be easier to put it in a 3M type, dual row connector, and just put it in the holes and push over at an angle.
That's up to you.
Yeah, and maybe I have a wedge kind of thing that could push, so I could push the thing down and not take any hands to do it. Have it clamp it on or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I know that we used to have for programming FPGAs, there was and I can't remember the name of it either. It's for Renesas CPUs and for a lot of other things too, but it was a connectorless connector. So what it was an array of pads with 2 holes, and the programmer had this head that was on it that was spring loaded, had the pogo pins in the head, and you just snapped it in place, and it made contact with the 10 pins, and then you could program the processor, and then you just squeeze the connector and it pops off the board. So it basically just cost you some gold pads on the destination board, so it was free. You didn't have to buy a connector.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. I'll worry about that in a little bit, because I want to make sure that the prototypes are working, and the prototypes are going to be although maybe I should not build the prototypes, because let the people getting them try out the instructions, to build what they need. And I don't know what you think about that.
That sounds good.
So you're going to get a kit of exactly what the user will get for the production model. So if you've got any problems, they'll come forth.
Yep.
And that would also let me test like production. So that would help a little. Okay, good. Thanks. I don't know that I'm looking forward to doing 500 of these, but
yeah, I think there's the rub.
Yeah. So I need to get my Explorer post over here with like 8 or 10 guys.
Isn't this a lot like OpenHPSCR?
Yeah, and we've got, it just takes a Raspberry Pi. I mean, how many of those do you have? I mean, 25, right? So just set them all out, hook monitors up to all of them, and run the tests on all of them, and you've got 10 test fixtures.
I think the hooking up is the time consuming part.
That's the time. That's always the time consuming part. I know on HPSDR boards with all the loop back cables and everything, the longest time of the test was plugging all the plugs in. And of course, if you get one plugged in off by one or crooked or you forgot one, then it fails and you go, oh, right, that's not in, that's not plugged in. And then you have to run the test over again.
Yep.
And then we always did 2 tests on HPSDR. We ran the loopback test, and then we actually put it in a radio. So when we were doing receiver boards, we had a complete radio with the transmitter and everything, and we plugged the receiver board in and make sure it worked, that it could hear and it could talk, so that the receiver didn't accidentally pull the bus down or something and break the transmitter. And believe it or not, is Dan still here? Yeah.
He's muted, but
and you know, we found boards that looked like they were okay, but they didn't work in the radio. So they passed the loop back, but they didn't pass the radio test. And I don't even remember what was wrong with those boards, but it was maybe something as stupid as when you're done with the loop back test, you got to move the straps back to where they're supposed to be. And if I forgot to do that, then they'd plug it in and it wouldn't work. So
I got to cut out, guys. I've got a tree service crew coming in the morning. I will see you next week.
7-3.
I gotta go too.
yeah, and I do too.
Yeah, and I do too. So
73.
thanks, you guys, for the help on the testing.
Yep.
I'm sure it won't be the
Thanks,
last
everybody.
question I have.
73. 73.
73.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
73.
73, all.
Well, 73.